Hi everyone, welcome to part one of a two-part topic we're going to be going over. And that topic is security. So this week we're going to be talking about users and groups and what those are and how they relate to Windows 7. And then next week we're going to be going over how to manipulate those users and groups into creating an effective security policy on your computer. So the first thing we need to understand is what is a user. So a user account is basically just a collection of information that is specific to a single person or a single entity. So for example, a user account tells you which folders and files you can and can't access, what changes you can make to the computer, and personal preferences, like desktop backgrounds, pictures, things like that. So now that we know what a user account is, let's talk about how to create and manage them. So there are two snap-ins, or rather there are two applications that are built into Windows 7 by default that allow you to manage user accounts. So the first one we're going to look at is definitely geared more towards a non-technical audience, and that is the Users Account Control Panel option. So to get there, all you have to do is click Start, Control Panel, and then if you're in large icon or small icon view, I'm going to change it to small icon view here, you'll be able to go into the user accounts option. So we're just going to click that. And now you can see here we're in the make changes to your user accounts page. So this page, exactly like it's titled, allows you to make changes to your user's account. You'll notice here on the left hand side we've got a few other links. I'm not going to go over those right now because a lot of these are basically just links to related things. But what I will show you are all the options you've got here on the right hand side. So first off, we have change your password. Pretty simple, right? So if you want to change your password or your Windows password, and this is the password you use to log in, you just click change your password. So right now, my current password is just password. So I'm going to type that in. And then I have to type a new password. So probably I want to type something more secure. So you've got to type it once in the middle box and then once to confirm. And then down here you can create a password hint. So keep in mind that the password hint is available to anyone who uses the computer. But it should just be something that you can use to remind yourself what your password is without giving it away. I'm going to leave it blank for now. So then I'll hit change password. And now my password's changed. If we wanted to completely get rid of the password that we have, we can just click remove your password and that will make it blank. So all you have to do is type the username in, which in this case is just Tim Green, and then hit enter and it will log you right in. Leaving a machine unlocked without a password is really, really bad practice. Your machine could get stolen from your house. If it's a laptop, it could get stolen from your bag. So it's always good practice to have a password on your machine. The other thing that you can do in this menu is you can change your picture. You can see here that I've got a cute little kitten as my picture right now. I happen to like cats, so that's why that's my picture. This is the picture that you'll see right here too, and it's also the picture you'll see when you log in. If you want to change that picture, you can click change the picture, and then you can change it to something else. We'll change it to the other cat. You'll click change picture. You can see it's changed here, and if we were to click start, it's also changed right here. The other thing we can do in this menu is we can change our account name. So if we want to change it from Tim Green to something like T Green, we can just type that and hit change name. And now you can see my username is T Green. If we wanted to change our account type, we can also change it here, or we can change it through this menu by clicking change your account type. Now, as you'll read about, you've got two different types of user accounts. So first off, you've got standard user accounts, which means let me back up. So you've got two types of user accounts. You've got standard user accounts and you've got administrator user accounts. Standard user accounts are basically, well, let's talk about what administrator accounts are. In your first or second module, I asked the question, why do you think you need administrator access? And most of you answered, well, it's because you need to be able to make changes and install things on your computer. So that's exactly right. That's exactly what the administrator account allows you to do. It lets you make changes and modify basically everything on your Windows 7 computer. Now, you wouldn't necessarily want to give all that power to maybe someone like your kids, right, who are going to just get on and install a bunch of applications and mess up your computer. So Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, has created another type of user account called a standard user account. So standard user accounts allow users to use the software, change some system settings that are specific to them. So, for example, their wallpaper, their screensaver, things like that. But if it makes changes to the computer or to the security of the computer, then they can't do that. So, for example, if they were to install an application, they would be prompted to put in an administrator username or password in order to install that application. So there's the old cliche saying, with great power comes great responsibility. That's basically what you're seeing here. You only want to give administrator rights, or rather, you only want to use administrator rights when you have to. Otherwise, you should use a standard account. So this is where you would go to change that. So we can click standard user, or we can click administrator. Now you can see here that standard user is grayed out, and that's because I only have this one administrator account enabled on this computer. In order for me to create a standard user account, or set this account as a standard user account, I would have to create a new administrator user, and then I'd be able to select standard user account. So all you'd have to do is select the account type you want, and then click change account type, and then you'd be good to go. So we'll click cancel for now. Now here you've also got the option to manage another user account. So I mentioned your kids. Let's say you wanted to create a standard user account for your children. You could click manage another account, and then here all you have to do to create a new account is click create a new account. So I'm going to make one for my wife. And I want her to have a standard user account because I inherently don't trust her to install the software. So I want to maintain those rights. So again, I'll create that standard user account. So we'll click create account. And now you can see here that she has her account set up. So really easy, really simple. There's not much to it. It takes all the guesswork out of what you're doing. If we wanted to manage her account, we could just simply click on her name here in this menu, and then we get all the options we had before, plus a few. So you have set up parental controls. So Windows 7 has the ability to set parental controls. So for example, if we wanted to set it up so that our user account here couldn't access games above a certain ESRB rating, it would block them. We could also set it up so that they couldn't launch specific applications or access specific files. And then they also have an option for web filtering and activity reports, but you need to install additional controls for that. So I encourage you to go ahead and play with the parental controls. This isn't often used in the business environment because we're managing things with Active Directory, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But it is really useful for the home user. So let's go ahead and back out of that, and we'll get back to where we were. Manage another user account, click on her name, and we also have the option to delete the account. So if we want to remove this account from the computer entirely, we just click delete the account. You also have the option here to delete all the files associated with the account, or keep them. So if we wanted to delete all those files, we just click delete files. If we wanted to keep files, they would show up in C users, TIA. We're going to click cancel for now because we want to leave her set up. We're going to go back. All right, so let's talk about the last option here. So we have change user account control settings. Now we went over user account control a few weeks ago, but I'm just going to click this. This is another way to access the user account control settings. So since we went over this already, I'm not going to go over it now, but I will just explain, or I'll just leave it there for now. So we'll click cancel. So that is the quick and dirty way, I suppose, of managing user accounts in Windows. This menu, again, is really great for people who might not have a good grasp on the underlying security risks to Windows, or they just want something quick and dirty and really easy to use to manage user accounts. You'd point them to something like this. But as IT people, we need more more useful tools in order to manage user accounts, especially when we're managing large volumes of them. So we have another tool that we can use called the Local Users and Groups Snap-in. So we're going to go ahead and close this. So the easiest way to get there is basically just to type, to come in here and go MMC. We'll say yes. And then we're going to go in and we're going to add the snap-in like we have been. So we'll click Add Remove Snap-in. And then we'll find Local Users and Groups, and we'll click Add. And we want to manage the local users and groups of this specific computer, but again, with the MMC, we can manage other computers as well. So we'll click Finish. We'll click OK. And now we've got our local users and groups snap-in. So you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and maximize that. We have two folders here. We have users and we have groups. So users gives us a list of all of the active and inactive user accounts on our computer. You can see here that we have an administrator group, a guest group, Tia, which is the account we just created, and Tim Green, which is the account I'm using. So the administrator account is set up by default, as you'll read about in your book. The guest account is set up by default, as you'll read in your book, but the problem is they are disabled. And this is by design in Windows. It used to be the administrator account was enabled without a password in Windows XP. I think it was SP2 or SP1 that had that. And so you could just go and type administrator into a computer and then you'd have full administrator rights. So they disable this by default, and the first user account that you set up on a machine becomes the new default administrator account. So for me, that was this T Green account I set up. So there's a few things you can do in this users folder. First off, we have the option to right click anywhere in the white space or click the action menu, and we've got a few things here. So what I'm going to show you here is probably the more important one, which is creating a new user. So if we wanted to create a new user, we click New User, and then it's very similar to the process we went to. We type the username, so this is the username they use to log in. So I'm going to just make one for myself. We'll just call it tgreen2. You've got the full name, so if you want to assign Timothy Green to it, this is just a more human readable name. And then a description. We'll just call this test or demo account for video. Down here, you'll set a password up. And you've got to type it twice. And then down here, you can see you've got a few options. So you've got user must change password on next logon. That's useful for when you set up a user account and you just want to give someone a temporary username and password that they can use to log on. If you set this option, it will force them to change their password as soon as they log in. So it's good for just giving it to them as a temporary password or setting up a temporary password and then checking this option. If you uncheck that, you've got two options that actually get ungraded. So first off is user cannot change password. You might set that up if you have someone who has a tough time remembering their password, and you don't necessarily want them to change it, or you don't want the password to change. You'd set that up there. You also have password never expires. So as you'll find out as you'll find out next week, you have what's called a password policy. So the policy basically just dictates different aspects about how passwords are set up on your computer. So, for example, you can set it up so that the password doesn't, it has to meet a certain complexity requirement. You can set it up so that it has to meet a certain length, and you can set it up in all sorts of other ways, but that's a topic for next week. So you can set it up so that the password never expires, and that will overwrite any sort of password policy that you have set up. Oh, I'm sorry, and by the way, one of the password policies you can set is password age. So for example, if you want if you want a user to force a user to change their password every so often, let's say every 60 days, you can do that. But if you have this option checked, it will overwrite that so that their password does not expire. And then if you want to disable the account, you can select account as disabled. I find this really useful for when I am setting up new user accounts and I haven't quite finished the user account setup. So I'll disable the account until it's ready to go. So we don't want to check any of these for this one, and we'll just click create. And if you type the passwords incorrectly, like I just did, it will prompt you saying, hey, those passwords didn't match. And that prevents you from mistyping a password. So now it's going to go through and create my user account, and we'll click close. And now you can see here, tgreen2 has been created. So that's how to create user accounts in this one. I find it a little bit more powerful and robust. There's a few other things you can do, like we saw with the MMC snap-in. I think that's pretty much all I want to show you as far as the right-click menu goes. So let's talk about the groups folder. So let's say you have 100 different user accounts. So you've gone to this user account here, this users folder, and you've created 100 different ones. And then you want to go and, like you did last week, assign permissions for, I don't know, let's say 20 of them for a specific printer. Well, as you discovered, it can be kind of a pain to have to go in and assign specific users to an object in Windows. So rather than having to go and assign 20 of them to a single user, you can create a group, and then you can assign just that group to that object. So for example, if we wanted to have just Tia and Tim, but not tgreen2, become print to a specific printer, we could go in here and we could create a new group. So I'm going to call this one printers group. We'll call it print1. That's the group name. I'm just going to call it prints. We've given it a description. So this is really similar to creating a new user account. So the description for this are users that can print. And now down here, we have to just add the members to that group. So whoever we want to use this printer, then we'll assign them to the members of this group. So we'll go in here and we'll say add, and then I'm going to type Tia and then click check names. And then that's going to search for the name Tia. Found it. We'll click OK, and then that's added her as a member of that group. Now, some of you probably found out, if you go in here and you type an incorrect name, so we'll just type TJIM as if I mistyped it and click check names, you get this box that pops up. Now this box says name not found, and this is just trying to tell you, hey, the name you typed in isn't found on the system. Do you want to change where you're searching? We're going to click no because we know the name. But if it can't find the name, or if it can't find the user account or the object, then you'll get that box that pops up. So I said I want Tim. I'm going to click check names. Oh, sorry, I don't have a Tim, and this is the user account name, so that's the object name. So I'm going to type tgreen and click check names. I'm sorry, bear with me a second. Sometimes you'll run into this. We'll click cancel. We'll move past this just for now. I'm going to go back and check the name. So you can see here that we've got Tia as a member of the group. We'll click create. We'll click close. And now we have that Prince group created. Let's go back and we'll check the name. We'll check my user account name. So this is probably a good segue here. So hold on, keep that the notion of groups in your mind really quick. Let's go back to the user accounts here. So you saw there that I had some trouble figuring out what the user account name was. Well, if I wanted to add that, or if I wanted to figure out what that user account name was, I could come in here, I could right click this and then select properties. Now you can see in here that we have some information about that user account name. So this is just the general tab. So this is the human readable name we set up. This is the description we set up in the previous steps. And then you can see here that you've got a few options available to you. In addition to that, you can click this Member Of tab, and that will tell you all of the groups that this user is a member of. Additionally, it will also let you add this group to this user to a group. So for example, if we wanted to add this user to the administrators group, we could do that, and then it would show up as a member of the administrators group. You also have the option of profile here. So profile path and login script. So first off, if you want to redirect the user's documents folder to a different location on the drive, you could set up a profile path here. So for example, if we wanted to just redirect it to C, we just type that. Login script. So this is like a batch file or a VBS file. That you might create, and when a user logs in, it will run a script. So a script, I believe we've talked about this already, is basically just a set of steps that you'll have a user account, or that you can customize and have a user account perform when you log in. Scripts are really useful. We're going to talk a little bit more about them in a future video. So this is where you'd set the login script. Now right here, you just have to type the path of the login script. So for example, if there was a batch file that we wanted to run, and it was located in C, and it was called test.bat, we just have to type it there. And then home folder, so if you wanted to set up, for example, a network drive to connect all the time, we could set that up, and we could map that drive as a different drive letter. So you can do that all from this profile menu. And you can see here that ctest.bat is not a valid path name, and then you'd have to enter the path name here. And it's not valid because I don't have a test.bat file there. So I'm going to click cancel. And then I mentioned I was looking for the username. So the username for this account is actually right here under the name column. So if we wanted to go back and add that user to this group, we just say tgreen2, and then we click check names, and then you can see that it found it. So now that we've gone through that, we have a user. We have two users in this group Prince. Now next week we're going to go over how we can assign this Prince group to a printer. So I'm not going to cover that in this video, but this is how you would add users to groups. Now your lab's going to have you go through this groups list here, and even more so a little bit more in depth. But you're going to be going through and you're going to be kind of seeing what each one of these groups is and why you would use it. Now these groups here, they're all set up by default. Everything but the Prince group we just set up is set up by default in Windows. They each have a description here of what you're allowed to do with them. And they basically just give you different access rights to your machine. So for example, guests, you could set up specific guest group. Like let's say you have a friend that comes over all the time, but you don't necessarily want to give him access to install software. Then you'd assign him to a guest group, for example. Power users, they have limited administrator powers, but they can't quite do everything. And then there's a few more options a few more groups that we have. But basically, you're just going to go through and you're going to look and see what these groups are and what they do. So that is the Snap-in a nutshell. Like I said, you're going to go over, this week's all about creating users and groups and assigning users to groups and kind of delving into the default groups that Windows 7 has built into it. Those are the we talked about the two different ways you can go about managing users and groups on a local computer. And by local computer, I mean like a computer sitting right in front of you. So we can do that through the user account control panel, and we can do that through user accounts groups, through the local users and groups Snap-in via the MMC. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please post them to the discussion board or email me, just through Desire to Learn. I hope you have a fun time working on your lab this week. Security is definitely a very broad topic in the computing world, and this is just the first baby steps you're going to take into managing security. So I hope you had a fun time watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.